RuneScape just got 4 new extremely interesting spells with the release of 110 runecrafting and the brand new Time Rune. I tested out each of them and here are my thoughts. The first spell is Advanced Time, which in my opinion is the coolest and most interesting by far. It can be cast up to 3 times a week, and it allows you to quite literally advance time to remove the cooldown of a number of different activities. Most notably, this includes player-owned ports voyages, Anachronia base camp resources, managing miscellanea, player-owned farm growth cycles, sandstone, and archaeology research. If you're someone who doesn't like waiting for growth cycles or for dailies, this spell is absolutely busted. As an example, I'm going for 200 mil archaeology on my main account, where I can send off a 24-hour research mission for 264,000 experience. But with Advanced Time, I can send off that mission 3 times back to back to back, granting me almost 800,000 archaeology experience instantly. And if you're going for a Blessed Flask, use it on your sandstone cap and forget about it. In my opinion, this spell is a fantastic addition, and it's extremely worth using regardless of your account goals. I love that as a player who doesn't like dailies, I can use it to repeat an activity 3 times a week back to back to back. And if you're hyper efficient, you can now do your favorite daily 10 times a week instead of the usual 7. Overall, Advanced Time is extremely cool, and I'm a fan. Next up, we have Paradox, which is an Iron Man's best friend. It's a skilling spell that can be used on a variety of woodcutting, fishing, and hunter resource nodes, granting double yield at the cost of minus 60% experience. This lasts for 30 seconds per cast, so it's fairly costly on runes, but it's a massive time save if you're looking for resources on an Iron Man. Let's say you're out of blue blubber jellyfish. You'll be able to gather them at twice the speed with Paradox. Another really good use case is the 1,000 logs of each tier that you need for the War's Retreat bonfire. And with this spell, it'll take half as long to get it done. And for mining, Glorious Bars just got a whole lot faster to make. And the same goes for something like a Masterwork 2H sword. Although the rune cost is pretty high, I think that's actually okay, because as an Iron Man player, a lot of the time, you're making runes either as a means to train runecrafting or as a means to get magical threads for rune pouches. So in a lot of instances, the runes themselves could be considered a zero-time investment item. With that said, if you're a main account who's trying to make some money with Paradox, you need to be pretty careful which method you pick, because at the current prices of just over 10,000 coins per 30 seconds, you need to make sure that you're offsetting that and then some. In my blue blubber jellyfish example though, every single extra jellyfish I get is worth 10k, so if I catch 1 blubber jellyfish per 30 seconds, I'm breaking even, and anything past that point is pure profit. But now that we've got the skilling spells out of the way, let's get on to the combat spells. First off, we have Crumble Undead. Yes, the iconic OG Crumble Undead that was removed when the Evolution of Combat came out in 2012. Except this time, it's revamped and it's a whole lot stronger. Kind of. To start, the pros. It scales all the way up to level 99, and it's going to boost your damage by 30% against undead targets, which on paper is absolutely sick. The only problem is Crumble Undead is on the normal spellbook, meaning if you want to use it, you have to give up the ability to spellbook swap, and you also won't be able to use staples like Incite Fear, Exsanguinate, or Smoke Cloud. And because of this, considering there aren't that many undead bosses in RuneScape 3, this didn't feel nearly as good as I was expecting in testing. At Vorkath, I would much rather be using ranged or necromancy, and although my opening Sunshine was absolutely fantastic thanks to his stalled crit buff that I did at War's Retreat before entering the fight, after that first 40 seconds, it really fell off. Watching this back, you're gonna see I'm dealing an absolute ton of damage, and I find it hard to say that Crumble Undead is bad, but you also do need to think about how many different things I'm giving up in order to be able to use this setup. And as cool as it was to be able to skip every single mechanic up to the flight phase and how awesome that was, I still found that it completely fell off after that point, and I struggled to even complete a kill with magic, which is why you're gonna see a full necromancy swap in my invent. So what I ended up doing here is maging the first part, getting the skip, putting on the necromancy gear, and then cruising to a successful kill. And at Terrakit, it went extremely well, and I had a lot of fun dealing some good damage, but it's also absolutely not worth my time to swap spells just for Terrakit and then teleport back out after Terrakit to swap my spellbook back to Ancients. It was pretty good at Rots, but it still definitely doesn't compare to Necromancy. The one genuine use case I could come up for this would be normal mode or story mode Vorkath for Slayer experience as a lower level Iron Man. But considering time runes are extremely hard to get before 100 runecrafting and it's completely unboostable, this spell is not really useful at all. And I'd personally love to see some aspects of the spellbook system reworked, because this would be really fun if it was on Ancients or on some kind of brand new Omni spellbook that featured certain spells from all of the different spellbooks. For right now though, unless you're playing some kind of magic-locked competitive group Iron Man, you're probably not going to find a ton of use cases for Crumble Undead. We've saved the best for last. Kind of. Last but not least, we have Temporal Anomaly, which is one of the most interesting combat spells in the game. This is an aspect, meaning that when it's cast, it applies to your character for 12 minutes, just like Animate Dead and Darkness. Temporal Anomaly is basically the power gear equivalent to what Animate Dead is for tank gear, and as an aspect, it means that you need to choose between this, Darkness, and Animate Dead, as you can only have one of the three active at once. Temporal Anomaly gives you a chance to reset the cooldown of any magic abilities outside of Meta and Sunshine, and this percentage scales based on your magic power armor bonus. Although it states a maximum chance of 20%, the maximum I was able to get in full best in slot wasn't even 15%. In practice, this is pretty interesting, as even getting a greater concentrated blast reset during a Sunshine rotation is going to lead to a good chunk of extra damage. And it also means that double Omni Power has entered the chat. If you're someone who uses magic with power gear like Tectonic or Virtus, this aspect is a no-brainer to have on, and it's just a straight up bonus to what you were already doing. But there are a couple absolutely massive problems I have with it. First off, Temporal Anomaly requires the use of power gear. The most used magic gear in endgame setups is not power gear at all, it's actually hybrid gear, because Animacore of Sliske provides an extra 6.6% critical strike chance, and that synergizes extremely well with all of the other crit buffs and the Fractured Staff of Armadyl special. That extra critical strike chance gives you a ton of extra damage and a ton of extra adrenaline. So for me, the question isn't, is Temporal Anomaly good? It is Temporal Anomaly good enough for me to be willing to switch off the Sliske for Tectonic instead? And after 5 days of fairly rigorous testing, I have come to the conclusion that in my opinion, no it is not. Sliske is just so much smoother and more fun to use, where Temporal Anomaly is really hit or miss. When it activates on that Omni Power so that you get a double Omni Power, or it activates on that Wild Magic or Tendrils, it's amazing, but that's only going to happen every few kills at a boss, where I'd much prefer the constant crits and the constant adrenaline of the Sliske gear. Take this Phase 5 Virago as an example. I'm using Temporal Anomaly and my full set of Elite Tectonic, so I've got a 15% reset chance of the cooldown of any of my strong abilities in my Sunshine rotation. But unfortunately, I don't have the RNG to get a single proc this entire Phase 5, so effectively, Temporal Anomaly did absolutely nothing for me. Whereas if I'd been using Sliske, I would have had more critical strikes, which also would have translated to more adren, and I would have been able to use more stronger abilities. But there's one other major issue with Temporal Anomaly that makes it not very fun to use. The Tier 95 Wand and Orb grant a chance to reset your bleeds, and when they reset, they hit instantly, and it looks like this, so you can cast it again. With Temporal Anomaly active, it can also reset your bleeds, but this time, they don't hit instantly, which means if you get a bleed reset and you think it's from your Wand and Orb, but it's actually from Temporal Anomaly, and you end up firing that bleed again, you will end up clearing your own bleed with the same bleed. Which feels pretty bad, to be honest, and I didn't find it very fun to have to constantly be monitoring and looking at the boss monster and making sure that the bleed instant hit before pressing it a second time. Is anyone else generally just very annoyed with bleeds? They work in such a weird, magical, wacky way, and I would absolutely love to see a bleed rework, because bleeds continue to be the absolute bane of my existence. One other important thought on Temporal Anomaly is it's not a game changer yet, but there are 3 new sets of magic gear that have been announced to be coming out in the next year according to the roadmap. There's going to be Tier 90 crafting gear from 110 crafting, Tier 95 magic robes from a Maskit, and something called Masterwork magic armor. And if any of these 3 sets end up being power gear that also provides crit chance, we'll be back in business, and Temporal Anomaly will become a staple and a mainstay in anyone's magic setup. But for right now, I'm going to continue to use my Sliske because I personally find it a lot more consistent and a lot better to use. That's my rundown of the 110 runecrafting Time Rune Spells, but I also want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one.